Is it that life isn't fair? Like, is that fundamentally true? And, we'll kind of go down a little bit of psychoanalysis as to why that might be a presumption that should be questioned. Why should that be questioned? It's like, okay, so here's something interesting to know. Here's a psychological notion that's technically true, that's useful for you guys to know over the course of your life. And this relates to, we've discussed this in the previous classes, the dopaminergic system. Okay, so related to the neurochemical dopamine. So it's technically true that to the extent we value something is the extent for which we had to struggle to attain it, or in its scarcity, so in its rarity. So in other words, the more rare something is, or the more we have to struggle to attain it, the more we value that. So you can think of it like this: no struggle, no value. No rarity to the object or the achievement, no value. So to the extent of the rarity or the struggle is the value of that. That's technically true from a dopaminergic standpoint. That's technically true. So what does that tell you? What that should tell you is that the people in which things come easy to, things come easy to them, but they don't experience nearly the satisfaction or fulfillment that the people who have to struggle to attain those same goals absolutely fundamentally experience at high intensities. That's the idea of value. It's so much more valuable to people who have had to struggle to attain it. And so then that makes you ask the question of like, well, they could say the same thing. It's like, it's not fair I don't get to experience the level of fulfillment, contentment, and satisfaction that the other people who had to work so hard to get this do because it came easy to me. Like in some ways, it's not fair that it comes easy to you, because to the extent that it comes easy to you is the extent that you don't get to experience the full value of the achievement. So how is that fair? So both sides and both people in both situations are asking themselves, why is this not fair? And so, well, doesn't that somewhat counter itself? Doesn't that somewhat cancel if everything's unfair, then is everything fair? Well, that's a philosophical question that you could spend your whole life thinking about. Would I rather be given all the money in the world and as a result experience no joy or satisfaction because there was no striving to attain it? Or would I rather be having to earn everything in my life, but be able to in my life experience the fullest joys and value and fulfillment? And so I would argue that if you think about this logically, most people would actually, in hindsight, unemotionally want to experience life in its fullest. And that's why, we should be very careful in just handing things over to the next generation, handing answers over, handing valuable items to us over, because if we just hand them over, it's valuable to us, but it's not valuable to who it's been handed to. And so they don't get to experience the joy and fulfillment. So that's the first step to this question of like, are our problems actually a gift? And is a life devoid of problems a curse? So here's the next thing you can ask. It's like, okay, if things don't come easy to me, that means that to attain those objectives, I will have to struggle, and I will have to problem solve, and I will have to really rise to become more than I currently am. Okay, so then that's growth. That's growth. Fundamentally speaking, that's growth, right? It's like, if things don't come easy to me, I'm going to be forced to have to really level up and grow to attain those things. So we know that when things don't come easy to you and you persevere and you're committed to the goal, one of the things that's going to come along that journey and pathway is major and significant growth. Character growth, problem-solving abilities, resilience, et cetera, et cetera. So growth will definitely be in the equation. if things come easy to me, like if the objective I'm striving for comes too easily to me, I'm not forced to muster up the problem-solving abilities, the critical thinking, the resilience that I would if things don't come if things don't come easy to me. So no problems, no growth. You could think of it like that. More problems, more growth, more potential for growth if you're committed to overcoming the problem. Okay? So growth is in the equation. So now we have more problems, more potential for joy, fulfillment, and growth. Less problems, all that comes about is possession. That's why they always say, celebrities, they can be so miserable. They could have the world, but they could be so miserable. And partially that's because there's no value in what was given to them, when it comes too easy, especially young celebrities where success comes too fast. And that's why it's like sometimes you should really be careful in hoping or wishing that your success comes too fast. It's like, okay, well, you have the goal, but you don't get to value the goal and you don't get to experience the character growth. In some ways, as crazy as it sounds, you should maybe hope to not get everything you want so fast. I've certainly experienced that in my own life. It's like there are things I wanted when I was younger that if I would have gotten, I would have become a shell of what I think I was able to become. A shell. And now in hindsight, I'm so thankful I didn't get it. So thankful. Because I could have got it, but I would have lost out on all that character growth. And I would have lost on the ability and the need to transform ourselves. It's like this is something interesting to know, much of the growth in our lives transforms as a result of necessity. And those problems that come to you that you don't willingly choose, but then you decide to overcome, those are in some ways the necessary challenges to transform yourselves. And we know fulfillment levels are much higher in people that have, I don't like the word self-esteem particularly, but those that feel a strength of character within themselves experience higher levels of contentment, satisfaction than those who don't, but have higher possessions and better possessions. And when I say possessions, a lot of times what I'm referring to, I guess I can put it in your guys' terms, is like results, like tournament results. It's like, you can have the tournament results, but who did you become along that process? And if those tournament results came too easily, you may have those tournament results, but you don't have character. Like, who did you become along the process? It's like, I didn't become, it was given to me. I wasn't forced to become. Okay, raise your hand if that is sinking in. And so, when we break it down and we psychoanalyze the whole situation, it's like, well, then are our problems a gift? Are our problems a gift? The most admirable people in the world, if you look at the history of their lives, it wasn't an easy path. It certainly wasn't a smooth path. And that's part of the reason why we admire them. It's like, look at all they had to overcome to become. And as a result, they're the ones that can make and have the greatest impact, because look at all the influence they have on the world. You just don't get that with everything being given to you. And so, don't be so quick to look at your disadvantages as a burden. Not when you understand not just the ontological reality, but also the psychological reality of that situation. Don't be so quick to view your problems as a curse. It's quite the opposite. It's like Dostoevsky knew this, the famous Russian novelist. He wrote about this. He formulated this idea that, if everybody was given everything they ever wanted, all the safety and security, what they would do immediately is they would ruin it all, throw it all to the garbage, and create chaos just to have some adventure in their lives. You know, Dostoevsky discovered that through his writings, and it's like you don't want everything that you think you want. Like, you don't. Because you would just throw it all away to have problems so that you could have some ability to not just transform yourselves, but some form of excitement. It's like there's no meaning in winning a match 6-0, 6-0 as there is winning it 7-6 in the third. Why is that? It's because you experience more problems along the way. That's true about life, right? There's no meaning in that breeze, you know, the 6-0, 6-0 version of your life. It's like all the meaning is to be found in the 7-6 in the third version of your life, if that makes sense. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, you can ask.
Yeah, I was going to say, without problems, you can't grow. Like, you literally cannot grow without problems. For example, if you're losing first round in tournaments, like you're losing every time first round, that might be actually a good thing, because then you learn better how to win, and you know better than your opponent how to get past those first rounds. And then you gain that benefit of learning to push through those struggles.
Yeah. The more matches you lose in a row, the more resilience it forces you to have to muster up. So, to the extent that you experience consecutive losses is the extent which you have the potential to build the resilience that will serve you 10 times greater in life. And you know, the reality is, it's like, let's say you go on a 10 match or 12 match or 13 match losing streak. Let's imagine. Like, it's so easy to know how to end that. Like, I could end that for you today. It's like, I'm just going to sign you up for like a green ball 1-star tournament. Losing streak over. Okay, you won. But did you grow? And if you didn't grow, well, then how does that impact your potential to win bigger later? Right? And so, yeah. So, you know, maybe our problems are a gift, right? Okay, so what do you do if you don't experience enough problems in your life? It's like, that's Abraham's call to adventure. You know, what do you do when you have too much safety or security? This is something good to know. When you understand that the necessity for problems. It's like you go out into the world and you chase problems. You know, productive problems that are useful from a humanitarian lens, of course. You know, you don't chase destructive problems, you chase productive problems. Problems that will transform you. Like, that's something useful to know. It's like, what do you do when you're not experiencing enough problems? Knowing how valuable problems are. It's like, don't be sitting all comfortable, you know, in your cushiony recliner chair. Get out in the world. Go take on responsibility, you know. The other session we talked about most of the meaning, technically speaking, we'll experience in our life comes as a result of responsibility. Okay, we're going to move on here. Positive emotion are the performance enhancers, right? Dopaminergic and analgesic properties, positive emotion. What is laughter? Is it a positive or is it a negative emotion? Well, that's a no-brainer. It's a positive emotion. And so you can absolutely think about that, not just as it makes the experience better, but it makes you better. And it certainly makes you more creative and resourceful. That's something you should know. Because you see how all this is related now as we put the sessions together? It's like laughter is a psychobiological signal that problems are resolved. And so what happens when problems are resolved? It's like less stress and anxiety. Less stress and anxiety, performance enhancer. But certainly less stress and anxiety, more creativity. So more resourcefulness. You know, that there's a lot of research that if you make a schedule too busy, creativity decreases significantly. And so, like, through your days, you don't want to just be like, go, 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 because you're just stressed and running on a treadmill. And so there's no place for creativity. Right? So you can think of stress as in some ways what would you say? It's like a blockage of creativity. And why is creativity important in tennis? It's like, that's resourcefulness. It's the ability to come up with solutions to unique problems. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to go off my schedule here and tie a different piece onto that. Okay, so positive emotion or performance enhancers. I said, what is laughter? It's positive emotion, right? So it's a form of positive emotion. Okay, so this is something useful to know, and I'm going to tie it back to what we talked about in one of the first sessions of this series. I told you the mental performance director at IMG, the former mental performance director, he said if you think negative thoughts, it's 3 times more impactful as your positive thoughts. And if you verbalize it, it's 7 times. Okay, so every time you lose a point and you get on yourself in a negative way, you can imagine that, like, let's say you verbalize it, like, oh my God, right? That's a form of verbalizing your negative emotion. 7 times. You need to counter it with 7 more positive experiences. So you can think of it like this, guys. This is something useful to know through the course of your career. Like, every time you get on yourself in a visual way, in a negative visual way, you got to counter it with 7 times you build yourself up in a positive visual way. So, like, what is a fist pump after a 1 point? Is that positive or negative emotion? That would be positive emotion. You need 7 of those similar types of experiences to counter your 1 negative. And what is positive emotion? Performance enhancers. Dr. Matt Rea, who was the former director of sports science at IMG, and I are very close friends. Then he went with the Saints and Alabama football and everything, and just a legend and so smart, like so brilliant. And he came up with these ideas where, in these models where, like looking at a sports science lens, when you're down in the score line is the most important time to solicit as much positive emotion as possible. It's like, why? Well, because that's the time you're most inclined to have negative thoughts. If you watch someone losing 6-0, 3-0, or 4-0, it's like the likelihood of them giving up is so high. It's like, why? Well, because all they've had is negative experiences. If you want to give yourself any chance of coming back, and your chances of coming back become quite great when you do this, it's like you have to counter as much of the negative experience with as much as of the positive emotion as possible. I had this teammate, I always tell this story, but he had this rule. Every time he lost the first set, the very first point he won, he was going to scream, "Come on." What does that do also, and what does that signal to your opponent? It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Typically and technically, he or she should be so defeated right now. Why are they screaming, "Come on"? Why do they not look like their spirit's been broken? And so that makes your opponents nervous and nervous and anxious. It's like that gives your opponent stress. What is stress? What is stress? We just talked about this 10 minutes ago. It's like stress is a performance. It's a performance deterrent. You're deterring your opponent's performance through your positive emotion, and you're enhancing yours through your positive emotion from a dopaminergic and analgesic lens. So you see, it's like this is so critical and important to practice. That's why in practice, right? What do you do in practice? You practice what you want to do in real time and game time. It's like in practice, what should you be practicing? based off what we're discussing in here. It's like, it's a no-brainer. You should be practicing soliciting as much positive emotion as possible. Every single point you win in practice, and you don't have to do it in an obnoxious way depending on the environment you're in, you know, but you certainly have to do it. It's like, every time you win a point, practice the fist pump. I see a lot of players and athletes, every time they lose the point or they have a bad play in other sports, they get on themselves. And every time they do something well, they don't say anything. Here's something interesting to know. I believe it was Sigmund Freud who said, or it might have been Nietzsche actually. Nietzsche said, if you want to really punish someone, you don't punish them for their sins. What you do is you wait till they do something well, and then you punish them, or you say nothing. It's like you wait till they do something well, and you be silent. That's a greater form of punishment. That was Nietzsche, I believe. I think it was Nietzsche. I'll have to check that later. It's like, well, what does that tell you? I mean, you know, what does that tell you? It's like, what do people do to themselves? It's like, and you know, that's one way to condition you. That's a way to condition you. We know this. Like there are psychological studies that showcase you can literally teach people to starve themselves. It's like anytime they get near the plate, you know, you punish them, and what will happen over time is you'll condition them to not eat. It's the same in tennis or performance. It's like, there's no greater way to punish yourself than to do something well and to not acknowledge it. And so every time you don't acknowledge, every time you do something well, understand from a psychological lens, you're punishing yourself. You're not doing nothing. Like, that's something useful to know. Like, you're never not doing something. You're always doing something. You know, it's never just like a blank, and you can relate this to this idea, you know, every time you say yes to something, you're simultaneously saying no to everything else. So what are you saying yes to? You know, it's like, if you say no to building yourself up, you're saying yes to breaking yourself down. Like, that's something to understand. Like, if you say no to building yourself up, you're saying yes to breaking yourself down. Why? It's because what did we just say in relation to Nietzsche? It's like, every time you don't acknowledge things you do well, you're punishing yourself. You're breaking yourself down. Okay, I'm trying to watch my time here. I know we're not going to be able to get through everything today. Okay, I'm going to try to get through this here, because it does relate to the psychobiological signaling, you know. So here's another thing to understand. Any thoughts or first I'll take any thoughts or questions regarding that topic if anybody has. Yeah, go ahead, guys. One of you.
All right. So I want to talk about the importance of the positive emotion, like you said.
Yeah.
So, for example, the other day I was down in a match, 4-0, second set, and I just brought crazy positive emotion, just energy, like screaming, come on, every point. It was obnoxious, honestly. Like, I was screaming, come on. And I came back. He beat me 6-4, second set. But I'm happy that I brought back that positive emotion. I'm way happier with that result over just giving up and having a 6-0. And then the third set, same thing happened again. He was up 7-1, and I came back, brought the positive emotion. He beat me 10-7.
Right.
But I think that's way better than losing.
Absolutely. Let's think about that for a second. It's like, it's not what you have, it's who you become that matters. You could have the win, Zam, but if you don't become a better version of yourself, you won't have the bigger win later. And so you have every day in the present, you guys have the choice to decide. Do you want to win now, or do you want to win bigger later? And if you decide you want to win bigger later, which is the opposite of hedonism, if you think about it, it's maturity in its definition. Literally, technically speaking, it's maturity in its definition. If you choose to have the bigger win later, well, then you can't value the win now. You have to value the growth now. In that moment, he became a more resilient competitor. That's going to be of greater value later on, right?
And I'm also way happier knowing I gave it my all in terms of energy than knowing like I would have lost without giving it my all in terms of energy.
That's because you've done a great job of valuing stable goals. And here's something you guys should know. The people who are more likely to achieve unstable goals, like this is technically true. People that value stable goals are more likely to achieve unstable goals. People that value unstable goals are less likely to achieve the unstable goal, obviously, and the stable goal. So that's evident actually in the course of your career. But that's Viktor Frankl's model, which is, he said, success is not something to pursue, it's something that ensues. You develop the characteristics that lead to success, and then success will find you. That's Viktor Frankl, He wrote that book, Man's Search for Meaning, one of the great Austrian psychiatrists. Okay, Phoebe, but what you're trying to do is find the pathway to your success. You're trying to find pathways to success. That takes experimentation. But there are endless possibilities to get to how you want. You just have to become knowledgeable and learn how to think. As time went on, I tilted much more to the liberal arts and humanities because I realized, when you study something like a formalized topic, that oftentimes they teach you what to think. When you go into fields like humanities or liberal arts, they teach you how to think. When I realized that, I said, would I rather know what to think or how to think? It's like, that's one of my critiques within the schooling system is they don't explain well enough why you need subjects like the humanities or history. It's like, well, you can learn everything about yourself and the future from history. And that could be pretty hopeful because, in another session, I spoke about all the progress we made from the late 1800s to now. It's like in the late 1800s, the average wage was $1.50 USD, which would be equivalent to like $46.50 in our world and time USD now. It's like that's what people lived off of, for their whole family to feed. See, it's like, look at all the progress we've made. History, this is where you should be hopeful in some ways. It's like, we've overcome. You can see all that people have overcome through history. And that should teach you that you have that within you. It's like, no. People have overcome greater challenges in the past. I can certainly overcome this.